Hey folks, this is me. You know who me is? I'm sure you do. I hope you do. And I got a pretty good response from my last video. The one where I was remembering some of my childhood friends. I just want to talk a little bit more about them. Been thinking of them lately because, well, as I approach the prime of my life, I find I had the time of my life. And yeah, I just want to talk about these guys I grew up with, because as I get older, there's a special place in my heart for them. And unfortunately, after many years of not ever seeing them again, or for quite a few years that went by, we lost touch. But childhood friends, I guess, have a special place in your heart. And they were a part of your childhood when you were young and gay, when gay meant happy, not no sexual connotation. But yeah, I came across this old canister of 8mm film, actually Super 8 sound film, and it's a recording I made because I had my father Jack got me a Super 8 sound camera. I don't know if it was my birthday or Christmas, and we made home movies. There's a couple of them on YouTube, Marx Brothers movies, and me and my friends, Paul Hines, lifelong friend of mine, played Groucho. John Canigliaro was Chico, and I was Harpo. And this one film I just came across was a show that Bob Hope did, one of my comedic idols. He was doing a show. He was filming it, recording, a TV special. It was being recorded at Central Park, and me and I'm trying to remember. I know for sure my friend Philip was there, Philip Labasco. So I actually have. He's not in the Marx Brothers homemade films that I posted, but he is in this particular film, this Bob Hope Central Park show. I know he was there. I'm not sure who else. John Canigliaro must have been there, because he was always with me. He was actually my best friend for the longest time, childhood friend. And him and I used to always go into Manhattan together. We lived in Brooklyn, but we're always going into Manhattan. That was like our personal playground. And we used to go to see movies a lot. We went to see a lot of Marx Brothers movies in the revival theaters. There were a lot of revival theaters in Manhattan in those days. And the Marx Brothers in the 70s, like the Marx Brothers were rediscovered by the younger generation, and they were always showing the Marx Brothers movies in the revival theaters. And we would go all the time. I remember there was a magazine called Q Magazine, and it would list, and I'd look up to see where the if any Marx Brothers movies were playing, and they usually were, and where they were playing. And we would go to all these different theaters in Manhattan, a lot of times when we should have been in school. And so John must have been there in Central Park, I'm sure. And I also think my friend Freddie Wagner, his younger brother Craig Wagner, I think he was with us too. So it must have been me, John, Philip, and Craig. And we were the only four that would go into Manhattan. Usually it was me and John, and every now and then Philip would join us, me, John, and Philip, and once in a while Craig. And we were the only 4 guys from the neighborhood that would go into Manhattan. Because that was like another world, you know, and everybody else in the neighborhood, they were actually scared. They would never admit it, but they were scared. They were scared to go into Manhattan. We would always go, you know, sneak in, not pay the fare, and ride the trains and go into Manhattan. And like I said, that was our own personal playground. So I'm sure they were all there. So I got to get this film put on digital, you know, so that I could put it on YouTube, and just to have something with Philip in it, because Philip was one of my other best friends, and he's not in any of the homemade movies that I still had that I posted. And there's just a couple of these Marx Brothers ones, and then me and Paulie Hines, we did one where we're just playing all these actors. We loved the old movies, the classic actors, you know, James Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, one of my favorites. And matter of fact, during the time of the Marx Brothers revival, there was also a Humphrey Bogart revival, and you would see a lot of Humphrey Bogart movies in the revival theaters. But those revival theaters showed, besides, you know, Humphrey Bogart, every now and then you'd see James Cagney, or, you know, John Wayne, or whoever, Clark Gable, and, you know, these revival theaters. And besides the Marx Brothers, you would also get Laurel and Hardy, W.C. Fields. Not many Abbott Costello movies in the revival theaters, because they were always on television. But they were all on television at some point. But Abbott Costello used to be on like every Sunday morning. You saw Abbott Costello movies. And I was always, as a kid, I always loved superheroes and classic comedians. And the actors like Bogart and those guys. And me and Paulie did a couple of home movies where, like, he was playing John Wayne and I was Clark Gable. And yes, in those days I passed for Clark Gable. And Bogart, we both took turns playing Bogart because we both loved Bogart. So yeah, I just want to remember those guys growing up. Man, we had some good times as kids. You know, we did some wild stuff, man. I don't know how we managed to stay alive sometimes. But yeah, we had a lot of fun, and you know, eventually went our separate ways. I lost touch with them as we grew older. I you know, pursued a career in show business. They basically stayed in the neighborhood and wound up moving to other parts of the state. As I did, I was living in California for a while, and when I came back to New York, like, except for Paulie Hines, I lost touch with everyone. But luckily, fortunately, and one of the good things about Facebook is you could connect again. And I looked for some of them that I just can't find. They don't seem to be online. But a friend of mine who's still in the neighborhood, his father owned the pizzeria, Sal Manzola, put me in touch with my real best buddy when I was really young, when we were really young. One of my first childhood buddies, John Napoli, put me in touch with him again, and I actually met up with him in the neighborhood. He has some family members still living in the neighborhood. He's living in Florida now. But I'd actually, you know, met him in person one day, and he's doing good. He actually worked for Con Edison for like 32 years. He's married a few times. We all kind of fancied ourselves, you know, Romeos at some point. I know when well, let me get to this. And John Napoli put me in touch with John Conigliaro. Now, John Conigliaro wasn't, we're all on Facebook, and John Conigliaro was on Facebook, but, you know, he wasn't that active on it. But John made him get in touch with me again, and I remember speaking with him for like 2 hours. John Conigliaro, my best buddy, on the telephone there. He was in the hospital, but he seemed okay. It didn't seem like anything life-threatening. Then a few months later, he passed away while he was still in the hospital. And he was the Chico to my Harpo. And, you know, the funny thing is, he was really like Chico in real life. Now, these guys, I know, as we got older, once we stopped being friends, they probably never looked at another Marx Brothers movie again in their life. You know, they outgrew that. I never did. And when I got in show business, I wound up being friends with people who were also in show business that also liked the Marx Brothers, and a group of guys that really were into the classic comedians, and we became friends. But John was really like Chico in real life. You know, Chico was the one, the Marx Brothers guy. His real name was Leonard. Chico was Leonard. He was the oldest, and Harpo was Adolf, but he changed it to Arthur because of Adolf Hitler at the time. And Groucho was Julius, and Chico was like the one they were always bailing out because he was a degenerate gambler, and apparently John was a big gambler, and so did Philip. They both developed these gambling habits. Like my father, my father was a bad gambler, a lifelong gambler. It's a habit. It's hard to break, I guess. And John and Philip became these gamblers, and but Chico was a gambler and a womanizer. Let's say womanizer. Chico was a charmer with the ladies, and he was a real ladies' man in real life. And apparently so was John. When I talked to him on the telephone, he was doing some bragging about, you know, what a ladies' man he was. And apparently Philip was also quite the charmer with the ladies. But, and John Napoli was the guy who was always getting married. I don't know if John and Philip ever got married. I know that when I was speaking to John, he was living with some woman. I think they might have just broke up or something. But, you know, Chico was married once, but he was not faithful. Let's leave it at that. So, yeah, John was a lot like Chico in real life, man. And he kind of even reminded me of him, you know, kind of looked like him, too. Similar, you know, not exactly, but anyway. I lost my train of thought, what I was going to say. Yeah, when I spoke with John, like I said, we spoke for like a couple hours, and he was, I guess, look, he was in the hospital, so something must have been wrong. You know, I think he told me, but I don't remember all the details. But then a few months later, after getting in touch with him again after all these years, he passed away. Philip passed away as well, not, I think before John. Philip had passed away. But I spoke with, after John passed away, I heard from Philip's sister, Camilla, and we spoke on the telephone, and she told me that Philip, well, he didn't really pass away. She thinks it was foul play, that he was murdered. And apparently he was in Vegas, and he was gambling at the, you know, gambling table, and, you know, they give you free drinks, and she thinks somebody had poisoned his drink, and he, you know, passed out there at the hotel, and he passed away. So there's foul play there, unless maybe he just passed out. I know she told me that he was beat up real badly. Some guy in the neighborhood had him beat up, I guess gambling debts, whatever. And he had an operation. He had to get operated on in his head. He had a concussion or something. So maybe he passed away from that. I mean, I don't know. She believes that it was foul play. And like I said, John in the hospital. And, you know, we all pass away sooner or later. But you'd like to, especially people you know. And here's a guy I just got in touch with again after all these years, and then he passes away not long after. You would wish they would, you know, at least live to old age. You know, pass away from, I don't like to say the word die. I don't like the word die. You would like to think, you know, you would like them to pass away from old age, you know, natural causes. Well, these guys were a couple of years younger than me. I mean, we're all like the same age, but they were a couple of years younger, so they should still be alive. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And I hope everyone else from the neighborhood is doing well. I'm trying to think of the other kids in the neighborhood there that we used to play together. I remember when we were real young, we always played superheroes. I always had a lifelong love with Batman. I think that was my first love, Batman. And I was always Batman, and my other friend would be Robin. We'd run around the neighborhood like lunatics. But trying to think of the other kids in the neighborhood. I know, well, I mentioned John Napoli, like my first childhood friend, and then John Cagliaro. probably my best and longest childhood friend, just recently passed. Philip was another one, Philip Labasco. We were the guys always going to Manhattan. Me, John Canigliaro, and Philip Labasco always going into Manhattan, especially me and John. But some of the other kids in the neighborhood, I know there was Patrick DeSena and Michael Ticatella. There was this kid named Rocky, I forget his last name. Another kid named Gary, who was Southern. You know, he had a Southern accent. His family was Southerners. And I guess they moved to the neighborhood. And he was the only Southerner. But I remember he had a lifelong. I was Batman. He loved Superman. And on Halloween, I'd be Batman. He'd be Superman. But I remember one Halloween, he was dressed as Superman, and this is what I remember about Gary. I mean, I remember other things, but this one really stands out. He was dressed as Superman. He got in a fight with another kid who was dressed as Batman, and that kid beat him up. So Batman beat up Superman. I bet Gary's lucky that I don't remember his last name. But anyway, yeah, those were the days. You know, you have childhood memories. And like I said, I had a good friend, too, when I was younger. One of my best friends at the time, Freddie Wagner. And then his younger brother, Craig Wagner, and he would also, like I said, once in a while come into Manhattan with us. And we were the only four, me, John Canigliaro, Philip Labasco, and sometimes Craig Wagner were the only ones that would dare go into Manhattan. Everyone else, you know, no, Manhattan, oh, that was like another world, you know. And they just didn't want to venture into Manhattan, but we did. We were the guys with balls. We'd do anything. But anyway, yeah, we were kind of like the Marx Brothers of Brooklyn, I guess. Or the Little Rascals, you know. But yeah, I just wanted to do this video remembering my friends, particularly John and Philip, who recently passed. And, well, maybe I'll see you guys again someday. Anyway, all right. If you got any childhood friends you haven't seen in a while, maybe you should try to look them up and get in touch with them again. We're not here forever, at least not in this life. Hopefully, there's you know, an afterlife, and we might see each other again, but we're not sure about that. This is the only life we're sure of, so let's make the best of it. Take care, everyone.